Every era has its oops moments. In 1986, unmarried women over 40 were told their chances of getting married were lower than their chances of being killed by a terrorist. Yeah, that was an actual headline. In the 90s, experts claimed the internet was overhyped and would never take off. Trust me, even the smartest people can get it spectacularly wrong. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 scientific blunders that shaped our world. But real quick though, don't you make the blunder of forgetting to like, share, comment, subscribe, click the notification bell, do all that fun stuff. You got it? It really helps the channel, I promise. And also, I'm going to apologize ahead of time for my voice. I was at the Buccaneers 49ers game and I cheered too hard, so sorry. Go Bucks. 25. The Great Horse Manure Crisis That Never Happened. In the late 1800s, big cities had one big problem. Horses. They pulled carriages, trolleys, and delivery carts, and with all that horsepower came mountains of manure. Public health experts and urban planners looked at the math and freaked out. By 1930, they predicted places like London and New York would be buried under several feet of the stuff. Yep, I get to work in that mess. Newspapers called it a crisis of civilization, and conferences were held to figure out how humanity would survive the manure apocalypse. Yet, no apocalypse came. Cars rolled in, horses rolled out, and the piles never materialized. A poopcalypse? Yeah, let's go with that. 24. Only 5 computers ever. In 1943, IBM's chairman, Thomas Watson, reportedly said the world would only need about 5 computers ever. 5. That's it. Now, maybe he was exaggerating, but even giving him the benefit of the doubt, it's one of the most famous bad calls in science and business. But to be fair, back then, computers were the size of rooms, stuffed with vacuum tubes and usually punching out math for the military. The thought of sticking one in your living room sounded ridiculous. What Watson didn't see coming was the transistor. It was tiny, cheap, and the key to making computers smaller and more powerful. Fast forward a few decades, and we weren't just putting computers on desks, we're shoving them in our pockets. And today, billions of people carry one without second thought. 23. The issue with the ozone. When scientists first spotted the giant hole in the ozone layer over Antarctica in the 80s, the panic was real. Chlorofluorocarbons, the chemical we put into things like hairspray, fridges, and aerosol cans, were chewing through the sky faster than anyone thought possible. The first models of the damage rolled out. The outlook was grim. Even if the whole world banned CFCs, the ozone layer wouldn't recover for hundreds of years. Some even said it might be permanent. Governments jumped into action, and by 1987 the Montreal Protocol came into being, where basically the whole world agreed to phase out CFCs. And then the ozone bounced back. By the early 2000s, the changes could already be measured, and today, scientists say it could be back to pre-1980 levels by the 2060s. I think the most amazing part about all of this is that a global environmental treaty actually worked, and that we proved we can undo damage if we act fast enough. 22. From hero to headache. When penicillin was discovered in 1928, everyone in the medical profession believed they had found a cheat code. Suddenly, the infections that used to kill people by the thousands were beatable with just a few pills. In fact, life expectancy in the US jumped from around 47 at the start of the 20th century to well into the 70s. For a while there, it really did feel like antibiotics would be there to save us every time. So doctors started handing it out for almost everything, even for the things they couldn't treat, like the common cold. Patients didn't help either. The second they felt better, they threw the rest away. And the leftover bacteria became smarter, learned a few tricks, and came back stronger. Today, whole categories of antibiotics are basically useless. 21. The dust trap that wasn't. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin finally stepped off Apollo 11's ladder in 1969, the ground didn't swallow them whole. The surface was solid, covered in just a thin layer of powdery dust and firm enough to walk on without trouble. Okay, that might not sound very surprising now to us, but before the landing, some scientists were convinced the moon was a death trap. Telescope observations had made craters look soft and drifting, leading to theories that the lunar surface was made of endless sinking dust. One wrong step, they warned, and astronauts could vanish into it. NASA wasn't about to gamble, so they built wide landing pads for the module and broad-soled boots for the crew to spread out their weight. The fear turned out to be completely misplaced. Micrometeorite impacts had compacted the lunar soil for billions of years, so it was far sturdier than anyone expected. 20. Hive and Seek. Some mistakes take a bit longer to show themselves. For example, in the 50s, scientists in Brazil tried something new. They wanted bees that could handle the heat better than European honeybees, so they crossed them with African bees, which were known for being more aggressive and territorial. The idea was to create a hardy hybrid for South America's climate. The plan backfired. Some of the hybrids got out before the researchers had a chance to reduce their aggression, and once they were loose, they spread quickly. By 1990, Africanized honeybees had been found in Texas, and during the next decade, they moved into New Mexico, Arizona, California, and even Nevada. 19. Statistics for Dummies. Oh, this one's fun. I'm not sure what people were trying to achieve with it, but in 1986, the media went all in on a scary story about single women. The headlines warned that if you were still unmarried at age 35, you only had a 5% chance of ever marrying. It got better too. If you were still unmarried by 40, you were more likely to be killed by a terrorist than find a husband. That line was repeated so much that the phrase "spinsters beware" became a running joke. The whole thing was born from a study by 2 Yale sociologists and a Harvard economist. They crunched a bit of household data, but ignored important details, like the number of women who had chosen to delay marriage. Reporters took the numbers, stripped away the nuance, and turned them into sensational sound bites. Later projections from the US Census Bureau actually showed how far off those scare stories were. In reality, more than half of women in their early 30s went on to marry, over a third in their late 30s, and about a quarter in their 40s. 18. Lord Kelvin's short-lived Earth. In the late 1800s, Lord Kelvin was at the height of his career. He had already left his mark on physics and engineering, and his confidence made him a dominant voice in scientific debates. One such debate was about the age of the Earth. Kelvin looked at the planet as if it were a giant ball of hot metal cooling over time. Using math about how heat moves through solids, he guesstimated that the Earth was between 20 and 40 million years old. And that became the leading idea. What Kelvin didn't know was that radioactive elements inside Earth release heat as they decay. That constant energy supply completely changes the rate of cooling. And once radioactivity was discovered in the 1890s, his numbers fell apart. By 1907, scientists used radiometric dating to show Earth is actually 4.5 billion years old, over 100 times older than Kelvin's best guess. 17. When the Milky Way was the whole universe. We used to believe that the Milky Way was all there was. The faint spiral shapes seen in telescopes were assumed to be small gas clouds inside our own galaxy. Harlow Shapley, one of the leading voices at the time, even argued that the universe was only about 100,000 light years across. That idea was annihilated in the 20s when Edwin Hubble studied the Andromeda Nebula with the Mount Wilson Observatory. He showed that Andromeda wasn't a cloud at all. It was a galaxy in its own right, millions of light years away. The discovery was nothing short of shocking. If Andromeda was a galaxy on its own, then all the other spiral nebula we could observe were galaxies too. Just like that, the universe wasn't just bigger than we thought, it was billions of times bigger. Today's estimates put it at least 93 billion light years across. Shapley's number wasn't even close. 16. The Archaeoraptor. In 1999, we finally found the missing link between dinosaurs and birds. Well, sort of. The fossil discovery in China looked like a small predator with feathers, and it was exactly the kind of proof paleontologists had been hoping for. In no time, the fossil was displayed by the National Geographic Society and even featured in their magazine that November. For a moment, it seemed history had been rewritten. And then it turned out the fossil was a fake. Just like the well-known Piltdown Man hoax of 1912, this one had been mixed and matched together. A farmer in China had glued bird bones to the tail of a small dinosaur to make it look like a brand new species. It went from celebrated discovery to a cautionary tale in record time. 15. The Doctor Data. The thalidomide tragedy in the 60s showed how much damage a single drug could do. William McBride was the doctor who first sounded the alarm. That fact alone gave his words tremendous weight. So, when he published research in 1982 claiming that the morning sickness drug Debendox also led to birth defects, the world listened. The company behind the drug withdrew it, lawsuits against them multiplied, and an uproar ensued. Years later, however, investigators discovered that McBride had tampered with the data. His tests had actually found no connection, and he altered it to support his claim. When the fraud came to light, the fallout shook the public's confidence in drug safety and reminded the world just how quickly scientific credibility can come undone. 14. Cold fusion. In 1989, two chemists at the University of Utah claimed they had achieved nuclear fusion at room temperature using heavy water and palladium electrodes to force hydrogen atoms close enough to fuse. If they actually pulled it off, it would have meant almost unlimited clean energy without the need for massive reactors or extreme heat. The problem came when other laboratories tried to replicate it. The expected signs of fusion, like neutron bursts, simply weren't there, and their claim collapsed only a few months later. But the idea has never fully died. Recently, scientists in Canada built what they call the Thunderbird reactor and noticed a small bump in fusion reactions when they used similar techniques. It won't light up a city, but it shows that even failed experiments can leave behind something useful. 13. All the genes. When scientists first tried to estimate our genetic blueprint, the numbers they came up with were way off. Bacteria have a few thousand. Fruit flies have about 14,000, so surely humans had to be up there in the, 100,000 range to cover everything from building a brain to running a body. That assumption lasted until the Human Genome Project wrapped up in 2003. We were stunned by the results. Humans don't have 100,000 genes. We don't even come close. The real number is only about 20 to 25,000, far less than expected, and in some cases, even less than plants and amphibians. Genes. 12. Chernobyl. Need I say more? Okay. On April 26, 1986, Chernobyl engineers attempted a routine safety test. To do it, they shut off the backup cooling system and ignored basic rules about how many control rods were needed to keep the reaction under control. Hence their name. That one decision sent the reactor into overdrive. The explosion that followed tore the core open and threw radiation into the atmosphere on a scale the world had never seen before. Over 400 times the fallout of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Fires burned for days, and radioactive clouds drifted across Europe. The official death toll sits in the thousands, but the long-term toll of radiation exposure has spread to tens of thousands more, and the area around the plant will never truly be the same again. 11. Currents that don't kill. $25 billion. That's how much the US spent trying to prove that power lines were doing more than just moving electricity. This idea gained a foothold after the writer, Paul Brodeur, ran a series of pieces in The New Yorker in 1989 suggesting that electromagnetic fields might cause cancer. Lawsuits, studies, and public fear followed. Huge epidemiological surveys in Canada, Britain, and the United States were kicked off, and by the mid-90s, the verdict was in. There was no link and no danger. Physicist Robert Park summed it up perfectly. Known cancer agents work by breaking chemical bonds in DNA, and the energy needed to do that stops at ultraviolet light. Anything longer visible, infrared, radio waves, or even the fields around power lines is simply too weak. The whole thing was preposterous. 10. The Mars Mishaps. You'd think if you were sending a $125 million spacecraft to another planet, everyone would at least agree on the units. Well, not so in 1999. The Mars Climate Orbiter burned up after NASA guided it in newtons, while Lockheed Martin had built it to work in pound force. The mismatch shoved it off course and straight into the planet. And if that wasn't bad enough, the Mars Polar Lander followed a few months later and disappeared too. Engineers tried for days to make contact, but nothing ever came back. The best guess is that a single missing line of code fooled the craft into thinking its landing legs had already been deployed. It shut off the engines too early, and that was that. 9. Life on Mars. Since I'm on the subject of NASA, were you around when they announced they found life on Mars? The year was 1996, and their discovery was centered on a tiny meteorite dug out of Antarctica's ice. The rock only weighed about 6 ounces, but scientists claimed it carried compounds like hydrocarbons and magnetite that hinted at ancient Martian bacteria. Journalists went crazy. One even called August 7th, quote, one of the most important dates in human history. Obviously, the celebration didn't last. Within 2 years, those same amino acids were also found in the Antarctic ice around the rock, and later researchers discovered identical compounds in lunar samples, which we know are lifeless. By 1998, Science magazine was quite straightforward about it. The so-called proof of Martian life wasn't proof at all. 8. Einstein's biggest blunder. When Einstein's general theory of relativity was published in 1915, almost every scientist, including Einstein himself, believed that the universe was static and eternal. His theory explained how gravity bends space and time. But when he started working on the math, the equations pointed to a universe that was either expanding or contracting. Einstein didn't trust the result, so he coined a mathematical term called the cosmological constant to keep the universe in place. It was basically his way of forcing the equations to match what everyone thought was true. Then, in 1929, Edwin Hubble revealed that galaxies are moving away from each other, and that the universe was expanding after all. Einstein later called the constant his biggest blunder and removed it. Ironically, the same number he threw out later became the go-to way to explain dark energy. 7. Nuclear winter. I'm not covering this one lightly, especially with everything going on in the world right now, but in the early 80s, Carl Sagan and a team of scientists warned that a large-scale nuclear war would not just kill people in the blasts, it could kill the planet. They argued that smoke and dust would rise into the atmosphere, block the sun, and trigger a nuclear winter as devastating as the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. The idea caught fire in politics and pop culture. People everywhere started picturing a dark sky, crops failing worldwide, and, in short, all of humanity freezing in the dark. But not everyone in the scientific community bought in. A lot of his critics pointed out that Sagan's models didn't fully account for rainfall or how the atmosphere actually moves. By 1990, even Sagan and his co-authors started dialing their predictions back. Their updated math confirmed that a nuclear war would cool the planet, but not nearly as much as they feared. Something closer to a nuclear autumn. Which is, to be honest, still 100% terrifying, but not the extinction-level icebox they first warned everyone about. 6. Centuries of melting packed into decades. Now, before you come for me in the comments, I know global warming is controversial. But whatever you believe, it is a fact that scientists seriously misjudged how fast the ice sheets would start melting. In the 70s and 80s, all the climate models accepted that the warming would be slow and tame, stretching out over centuries. They counted on natural elements like clouds and oceans to slow things down. But over time, those predictions aged like milk. By the 2000s, the world's temperature records were being smashed. Ice sheets, storms, heat waves, everything started moving faster than anyone expected. In Greenland's case, even though 2024 saw a somewhat lighter annual loss, Compared to earlier years, it was still a net loss. 5. The sky is falling. In 1998, the New York Times splashed across its front page that a mile-wide asteroid was on course to skim by Earth in 2028. The comparison to the dinosaur killer 65 million years ago wasn't exactly reassuring. The warning came from Brian Marsden at the Smithsonian, who calculated that the rock could come as close as 30,000 miles, basically a cosmic near miss. Reporters loved it. Public freaked out. And if any of my old teachers from Lee Academy in Tampa are watching, you know I did exactly that. Oh, I know it was 30 years in the future, but oh boy, was I freaking out. Oh man. But those numbers came from early trajectory data, and early data in astronomy can be shaky. As more measurements rolled in, the asteroid's true path became clear. Instead of buzzing the planet, it would pass at a much safer 600,000 miles away. So, no global catastrophe, no dinosaurs 2.0, just another reminder not to trust the first draft of orbital math. 4. The mini-horse theory of life. Since Colorado softened its approach to evolution in student tests a few years ago, Kansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee have adjusted their standards too, though not always in the same way. Some treated the subject lightly, while others decided to skip it altogether. The move put all explanations for human origin on equal footing, whether they came from science or elsewhere. That's when Mark Abrahams from Annals of Improbable Research pointed to a scientific example of how silly that logic could get. The Japanese paleontologist Chonosuke Okamura once insisted that the odd water patterns in rocks were mini fossils. He went so far as to argue that life descended from miniature horses, cows, and even dragons. Okamura's mini-animal theory has long been dismissed, but it shows how far science can stray when every idea is treated the same. 3. The Fen-phen Fiasco. Phentermine, a stimulant, and fenfluramine, an appetite suppressant, have both been around for years. Then, in the early 90s, Michael Weintraub, a researcher in Rochester, suggested they might work even better together for long-term obesity treatment. Doctors jumped on it, and before long, people were taking the combo to drop as little as 10 pounds. The crash came fast. In 1996, the New England Journal of Medicine published research showing that using fen-phen for more than 3 months increased the risk of primary pulmonary hypertension by 23 times. That's a rare but deadly lung disease. Soon after, other studies revealed that fenfluramine could also damage heart valves. By September 1997, the FDA pulled fenfluramine off the market, ending the craze overnight. Somewhere between 1.2 and 4.7 million Americans had already taken it. 2. Iridium's rise and fall. Iridium was supposed to be the crown jewel of satellite communications. Motorola spent $5 billion building a network of 66 satellites that could beam calls anywhere on Earth. From a technical standpoint, it worked. From a scientific planning standpoint, it was a disaster. The whole system had been designed in the 80s, before cell phones exploded. By the time Iridium finally launched in 1998, the world had moved on. People didn't want to lug around a brick-sized handset or pay $30 a minute for a call when pocket-sized cell phones were already cheap and everywhere. Iridium was bankrupt within a year, and Motorola was so ready to give up that they literally had software uploaded that could send all those satellites crashing back to Earth with a single button. It was later picked up for pennies, kept alive with Pentagon money, and turned into a tool for ships, soldiers, and rescue crews. 1. The internet? Overhyped. Amazon runs shopping, Google runs knowledge, and social media runs our lives. That's the world we live in. But in 1995, Clifford Stoll took to the pages of Newsweek to say none of it would ever happen. He actually insisted that people would always turn to libraries and daily papers. His boldest line being, and I quote, "No online database will replace your daily newspaper." There were plenty of experts who agreed. The internet still felt slow, clumsy, and better suited for researchers than the public. Of course, that prediction didn't last long. By the early 2000s, the world was changing, And today, billions of people log in every day. Stoll eventually admitted that he blew it, but his article still stands as one of the most famous faceplants in internet history. You know, that internet that totally won't make it. All right, that's all we got for today. But before you go, let me test your memory with a fun bit of trivia. In 1986, a headline claimed women over 40 were more likely to do what than to get married? A, survive a plane crash without a scratch. B, find gold in their backyard. C, win an Olympic medal. Or D, be killed by a terrorist. Let me know in the comments below. And since I'm talking about mistakes and surprises, you don't want to miss our related video, 25 chemical reactions that broke reality. It's got glowing liquids, shape-shifting metals, and reactions that rewrote the rules. Its link will pop up here in a couple of seconds. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell, do all that fun stuff. Helps out so much. Thank you guys. I love you all. I'll catch you later. What's your worst prediction that got totally wrong? Let me know in the comments below. See ya.